Welcome to Projector. This time we're setting sail as James Cameron's Titanic gets a 3D reissue. A group of deep-sea explorers, led by Bill Paxton, are looking through the wreck of the Titanic for the immensely valuable heart-of-the-ocean diamond necklace. They break open a safe and find a drawing of a woman wearing the diamond, putting an open appeal out on TV for anyone who knows the woman to come forward. A 100-year-old woman, Rose, answers the call, claiming she's the woman in the sketch, and she was wearing the diamond the night the ship sank. Rose tells them the story of her adventure on the Titanic, now played by Kate Winslet, where she was engaged to Cal, the son of a steel tycoon, played by Billy Zane. She finds the rich lifestyle suffocating, but her world changes when she meets Jack, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, a drifter with no money but heart to spare. The two have a whirlwind romance, but that's suddenly interrupted when the ship crashes into that infamous iceberg. I do feel a bit like an idiot having to give a plot synopsis for a film that either everyone has already seen, or is at the very least knows about. Titanic is one of the biggest films of all time. This was, for a very long time, the highest grossing film in the world. This is the sort of film that people have kept coming back to time and time again to see in the cinema, on video, on DVD, and perhaps even for the 3D version that I'm reviewing. Because virtually everyone has seen the movie, I'm not going to be avoiding spoilers like I normally do for Projector, but instead offering a full in-depth retrospective of the film, which is now on its 15th anniversary, and giving my assessment on what works and what doesn't. The thing with Titanic is that in the years after its release, in my personal experience, it's not a film you confess to liking. That's not to say it's not a film where people who enjoyed it are in the minority. People certainly wouldn't have paid to revisit the film over and over again if they hated it, but I do think it's one of those films that is so immensely popular that it developed a hatedom because people liked it, whilst others couldn't understand why they liked it in the first place. I had a discussion with one of my friends who merely dismissed it as being a crap film, which rather bluntly illustrates my point, but I actually think is full-blown incorrect. Yeah, Titanic is a flawed film with lots of problems in it, but a crap film? Never. Now, I believe what Cameron is trying to do with the film is to try and make the Titanic disaster empathetic to a modern audience. We know the facts, but because we don't understand it in emotional terms, we're kind of a bit like this tactless bonehead.
She hits the berg on the starboard side, right? Then the forward compartments start to flood. So now as the bow goes down, the stern rises up, till finally she's got her whole ass sticking up in the air. The bow section planes away, landing about a half a mile away, going 20-30 knots when it hits the ocean floor. Pretty cool, huh?
Thank you for that fine forensic analysis, Mr. Bodine.
Yeah, do you want to show a bit more compassion for the 100-year-old Titanic survivor by not acting like you're fawning over a train wreck? I actually think to some degree the character played by Bill Paxton is actually a bit of a surrogate for Cameron himself. He starts the film as someone who seems fascinated by the ship itself, but not really by the tragedy of the event.
The pressure outside is 3.5 tons per square inch. These windows are 9 inches thick, and if they go, it's sayonara in 2 microseconds. Alright, enough of that bullshit.
By the end of the film, he's a full-blown believer in Rose's story, tearfully accepting the fact that the quest for the diamond means nothing in the face of such enormous loss of life.
3 years. I've thought of nothing except Titanic, but I never got it. I never let it in.
The reason I say this is because apparently Cameron became obsessed with the Titanic, and it's clear the film is made by someone who understands the tragedy of the event, which may account for why it's so sentimental at points. The Jack and Rose romance operates on several different levels. The first is that it gives us a human element on the ship that gives us not only a reason to care what happens on it, but also what happens to them. The ship, the part of the story we do know about, is placed as background for these fictional characters. We don't know their story because they're fictional, as there is actually a chance that one of them, namely Jack, could die, and more than likely will. The second level on which the romance operates on is showing the class divide on the ship. Jack is a pauper trying to be a prince, managing to play out of his league, and he's sneered at and patronised by the rich folk, especially Cal. But he's full of life, just like all the poorer classes of the ship, as seen when he takes Rose to the party down on the lower decks, and that's what appeals to Rose, who is also technically poor. Her family is overcome with debt, which is why she's being forced to marry Cal. We all know what happened to the poor people on the Titanic, but Cameron actually makes that a key element of the film before the sinking, where it becomes a difference between life and death. But I also feel that there's a number of significant problems with the love story. By far the biggest is that the romance isn't interesting enough to sustain the movie. I'll explain why in a moment, but Titanic is a movie that runs well over 3 hours, and we have to spend roughly 90 minutes with the couple, and the way they're written means that the first section of the movie feels long. I can't help but feel the movie either needed to be shorter or more of an ensemble piece. The film is so focused on the love triangle that it's sometimes easy to forget that there are other passengers on board, and I think a few more glimpses of the ship would have made things feel a bit less tiresome. I think the problem is Jack. No offence to DiCaprio's portrayal, he does exactly what he needs to do, but the thing is, he's so perfect. DiCaprio was a heartthrob at the time of this film's original release, and the character is written with that in mind. He is the ultimate white knight, endlessly self-sacrificing, kind, noble, full of wisdom and endless passion for Rose. He's the ultimate boyfriend. You know, the one that kind of doesn't exist in real life. Which is probably a large reason for this movie's repeated appeal to women. Who doesn't want the ultimate lover to sweep them off their feet and save them from a life of mediocrity? And before you call me sexist, this is not an exclusively female thing. The male equivalent is a manic pixie dream girl, an archetype I'll admit I'm actually kind of a bit smitten with. So that's not really the problem. The thing is, Jack is so perfect he's really a bit boring. This is made worse by the fact that his antagonist, Cal, is probably the worst aspect of the movie. Billy Zane is not the greatest of actors, and he really hams this part up, but let's face it, that's exactly how the part reads on the page. He's not a human being, he's a cartoon missing a moustache to twirl. We're not given the chance to like Cal at all because Cameron wants us to hate him, but shouldn't the choice between Jack and Cal at least have a grain of conflict to it? But nope, he's an abusive dick who never misses the chance to be a snobbish arse. Cameron has never been a subtle writer to say the least, but this is something that needed a much more delicate touch than he gives it. For example, Rose's mother is also portrayed as a snob, but at least she's given a reason for being that way and has a scene where, gasp, she's actually borderline sympathetic.
How can you put this on my shoulders?
Why are you being so selfish?
I'm being selfish.
Do you want to see me working as a seamstress? To see our fine things sold at auction? Our memories scattered to the winds? It's so unfair. Of course it's unfair. We're women. Our choices are never easy.
In fact, the difference in writing between the two antagonists can clearly be seen towards the end of the film.
Don't you understand? The water is freezing and there aren't enough boats. Not enough by half. Half the people on this ship are going to die.
Not the better half.
See, Rose's mother actually looks horrified at the imminent loss of life, whereas Cal just looks like he's stopping short of cackling maniacally to a thunderclap. The film's lowest point is where the bad writing of Cal descends into stupidity as he chases Rose and Jack through the ship whilst firing a gun. Not only is it a forced way to bring the couple back down to the sinking levels of the ship, but it feels completely out of character even for someone like Cal. It seems almost like Cameron wanted to stick a gun in the movie, even though I think the drama of a sinking ship should be more than sufficient. But for all its faults, I think that Kate Winslet's portrayal of Rose manages to smooth over these problems. She feels real. I think in some respects she was overlooked because of Leomania, but it is her the film hinges around. It's really Kate Winslet's film. She can play both a woman of nobility that is also lively and free-spirited, even if she does have to spend much of the film fawning over Jack. I think that's because Cameron has always been far better writing women than he has men. A common feature of Cameron's work has been strong, independently minded women such as Ripley or Sarah Connor, and Rose fits alongside these characters, but whenever he tries to write male leads like Jack or Jake from Avatar, they always come across as being hopelessly bland. If it sounds like I'm being quite critical of the film, and I do think I'm probably coming across a bit harsh on it, it's only because Cameron has never been a great writer, even in his classic films like Aliens or Terminator 2, and his dialogue has always been a little on the ropey side, but his skills as a director more than make up for it. Cameron graduated from action films which are often simpler and more black and white, so when he moves into pure drama like he does here, that simplicity does become very apparent. And let's not forget that Cameron's film is full of fantastic character actors, all the way from David Warner to Kathy Bates, who really know how to make these small parts memorable. I do wish that we actually got to see more of them, hence why I wish the film was an ensemble. This is particularly apparent during the final sinking of the ship, where the film is finally forced to move focus away from Jack and Rose to the other people on board, which is probably part of the reason why that part of the film is the strongest. I guess my problem with the whole Jack and Rose story is that it does risk ending up being their tragedy as opposed to that of thousands, and a wider scope would have helped with that. But like I said, Cameron is a fantastic director whose technical ambition is simply incredible. The ship becomes a character in its own right, and the attention to detail in terms of the production design is simply fantastic. He adores the ship and he fawns over it with his camera, having lovingly recreated it. This was the first time I'd seen the film on a big screen, having been too young to when it was on first release, so this allowed me to see the incredible sets and background detail that pours off a bigger screen in a way one simply doesn't get from watching it on VHS, DVD or countless TV airings. And the sinking of the ship is truly incredible. Cameron utilised then groundbreaking special effects work to portray in detail the sinking of the Titanic, and it has an incredible intensity even to this day because the effects still stand up. I think part of this is because the legendarily tough shoot was practical, which is why I think this is a far superior film to the synthetic and CG dominated Avatar. There's a weight and heft to the film that you just don't get from Cameron's supposed masterpiece. I think if you enjoy the film but you haven't yet seen it on the big screen, I'd actually recommend you to go and see it in the larger format. 3D glasses be damned. Which finally brings us to the 3D. Now I'll put aside my cynicism at re-releasing something that already made bucket loads of money in time for the 100th anniversary of the disaster, with added 3D just to price gouge more money out of people. The fact is, the 3D is not really all that great. Cameron may have spent loads of money on post-conversion, but you only occasionally see the results. Ironically, the scenes which benefit most from the conversion are not the sinking scenes, but the early scenes with the Titanic, especially those involving heights, like Rose's suicide attempt. But whilst you can put 3D into the 2D movie, you can't take the 2D out of the 2D film. Titanic just simply isn't shot to be a 3D film. When Cameron opens up his frame, yes, there is justification for it, because the cinematography feels like you're wandering on the ship. But there's also a lot of dialogue scenes, and what I noticed is that these scenes are shot in hard close-ups, which are not 3D friendly at all. The result ends up being flat and unnoticeable a lot of the time, and when I took off my glasses, because my eyes were starting to get exhausted at the sheer length, I noticed that a lot of the time, the film wasn't all that out of focus without them. So honestly, the question you really have to ask yourself is whether or not you feel it's worth it to go and see a film that you've probably already seen before, just for maybe 10 minutes of effective 3D throughout the entire thing. Now I don't know about you, but I don't call that very good value for money. So there you have it, Titanic. It's a massively successful film, but that doesn't mean it's free of problems. But whilst it has some issues with the writing, it is an immensely entertaining film because of Cameron's direction, and I feel that it's a satisfying experience. By all rights, it shouldn't work nearly as much as it does, but it's unarguably a masterpiece on a technical scale. I think the film has held up incredibly well over the last 15 years, and perhaps that's a testament to the quality of the film that it stands timelessly. Flawed, yes, but not crap. The 3D version I'm torn on, because whilst it's worth seeing the amazing production design on the big screen again, the 3D is not really all that great because the film was just never intended to be in that format in the first place. Ultimately, the saddest part of the film for me is that it marks the turning point from when Cameron was the awesome action director of Terminator 2 to the overblown sentimentalist of Avatar, and I feel that old version of Cameron may never return. I'm Matthew Buck, fading out. Hello, Matthew Buck here, and I'm here to talk to you about a film I'm preparing to be involved in called NerdQuest. A sort of Suburban Nights meets Shaun of the Dead, it's a project being produced independently of Channel Awesome by Mike Jeavons of Shameful Sequels fame. I have a major role in the film, which also has Welshie, Happy Harry, Ashens, Guru Larry and Mazco X all involved. We're heavy in pre-production, with makeup tests and location scouting, and we're going to have a script read-through very soon. We plan to shoot in the summer, but in order to do that, we need your help. We need to cover the cost of accommodation and production, and we need donations to cover it. Our target is $16,000, and any donation, big or small, would be a great help. However, your donations will not be unrewarded, as we offer perks like DVDs, props, and even a chance to be in the film itself, depending on how much you give. So please give whatever you can to www.indiegogo.com/nerdquest-movie, and thank you for listening.